Here is the 6th lesson, an endgame master style. Probably you have noticed that all the endgame masters have a crystal clear, beautiful style of playing. When you look at their games, it seems like everything goes like a dream and they win the games easily. In this lesson, I'm going to tell you how they do it. When you digest all this information, you'll become a real endgame expert. An endgame play has some specific properties. That's why the style of playing in an endgame should be different than in other phases. Most players don't understand this difference. I hope that after a study of this lesson, you will know it clearly. Okay, here is the first principle. In an endgame, the stable positional factors have the greatest value. The stable positional factors are a material and a pawn structure. In the middle game, the dynamics and concrete variations are the dominating factors. In an endgame, playing the stable positional factors is the order of the day. It's really one of the greatest recommendations concerning an endgame play. First, you can easily evaluate any endgame position based on these two factors, the material and the pawn structure. Secondly, following these guidelines for making you a great positional player. In an endgame, you can't take an opponent's position by storm. You will rather increase your advantage slowly and gradually. That explains why the main way for a win in an endgame is to collect stable positional advantages. What are the stable positional advantages? You already know it. They are the stable positional factors, a material and a pawn structure. More specifically, the stable positional advantages are an advantage in material, weaknesses in an opponent's position, and your passed pawns. Here is a general scenario of a win in an endgame. First, you got an approximately equal endgame position. Then you start gaining little positional advantages. Each little advantage doesn't bring huge and winning chances. However, when you collect a certain number of little advantages, your position becomes much better. It gives you the possibility to realize one of the winning endgame plans. The position is approximately equal. Though white has a weak pawn on c4, it's the only real weakness in the white's position and it's well protected already. Some players would probably agree to a draw here. Let's see what black player did instead. He played f5. After e takes and g takes, black has improved his position slightly. Now he has a pawn majority in the center and a potential passed pawn on the e-file. Yes, it doesn't look like black can really do something about it. However, we gained one stable positional advantage. There followed king f2, king f7, king e3, king f6. Both players bring the kings into a center, which is certainly the correct idea. White played king d4. Now white wants to play c5 to exchange his weak pawn. Of course, black should prevent it. As we already know, you should collect stable positional advantages in an endgame. It certainly implies that you should not lose any stable advantages. Rook c5. Black is fixing the weakness. You may say, so what? Black can't attack it anyway. Yes, you're right. Moreover, the position is equal objectively and it should be a draw in the end. However, you should not think like that. Your goal is to collect stable positional advantages. If it gives concrete winning chances later on, that's great. If not, that's fine, you can accept a draw anytime. At least you gave your best to win the game, and your opponent's efforts is up to par. Rook a1, bishop f7, rook a6, h5. Black is going to gain one more positional advantage. After h4 and h takes g3, black will exchange his weak pawn and will create a weak pawn on g3. Bishop d3, h4, rook b6. White is waiting. Probably he is thinking, no problem, he can't attack the g3 pawn anyway, and even if he will, I will just play rook b3 and will protect the pawn easily. Let's see what happened in the game. Rook c8, rook b5. White made one another careless move, and now black can gain another stable advantage. e5. Black is using a tactical device. If white takes the pawn, he takes and then rook takes. Black will answer rook d8 check and will win the white's rook. Okay, let's go back. So after e5, white has to go back in c3, e4. Black got a protected passed pawn. Bishop e2, h takes, and white has a weak pawn on g3. Rook g8. All of a sudden, black's position is winning. White is forced to resign after c5, rook g3, king d2, and rook g2. Black has a material advantage and he is threatening bishop c4 or rook takes e2 first. During a long time, black collected stable positional advantages. Each of them didn't give much for black by itself. However, when black gained a critical mass of advantages, his position became winning. If you look at the games of endgame experts, you will see that something very similar happens always. Here is the next idea. Since you should collect stable positional advantages, you should take something every time when possible. Sounds obvious? No, it's not. When you don't have a focus on the right things, you will think about many different ideas. And in this case, you may easily prefer something else instead. Let's look at this position again. Black just played h4 and it is the white's turn. In the game, white played rook b6, which is a terrible mistake. How may white not take the pawn? I can't understand it. All the endgame masters have a prehensile reflex. They take whatever they can. First take and then think. Well, I'm a bit joking, but only a bit. If white would take a pawn, he would probably save the game. However, white didn't think about collecting positional advantages, and he lost. There is another rule about this topic. In an endgame, stable positional factors are often more important than temporary factors, piece's activity. In a middle game, an opposite situation often happens, but we're talking about an endgame now. It means that you should gain a stable advantage even if it gives some activity to your opponent. An opponent's activity is a temporary factor. You will push back his pieces and will neutralize it. A stable positional advantage will remain with you, however. White is up a pawn, but black is more active. White played knight e1, taking the bishop and covering the d3 square. This move certainly is quite passive, but white wants to prevent bishop d3 move, which will fix the backward pawn on d2. Bishop e4, rook takes a7. You should take something every time when possible. Yes, white is not developed yet. However, you shouldn't worry about it too much. Endgame masters first take and then think. King b8, rook a2, bishop g6, and b4. White wants to trade his weak pawn and to get one more stable positional advantage. You may wonder, what the heck? White is not developed, his rook is still on h1, and his knight is still on e1, though it's an endgame already, and white is caring about a pawn? Yes, you're right. In a middle game that would be a suicide decision. In an endgame, however, it's fine. Stable positional advantages are more valuable here. C takes, rook b2. White exchanged his weak pawn and got a powerful pawn chain in the center. Knight e4, bishop takes, f3, bishop g6, e4. White wants to create a powerful pawn bunch in the center. By the way, he is still ignoring development. f5, d3, pawn takes, rook f8, rook takes b4, and rook f6. Okay, let's stop here. And black tries to get some counterplay on the f-file. White played king e3, rook df8. White has a great positional advantage, and he starts neutralizing the black's activity gradually. Rook b2. First white covers the second rank. Bishop h5, h3. Then white wants to push away the bishop. Rook f1 and rook b to h2. White is keeping the position intact. Of course, such maneuvers look strange, but it's a temporary situation. White doesn't allow black to get any counterplay and will then push the black species away. Rook f2. Black is playing creatively, but it rarely helps in an endgame. Rook takes f1, rook takes h2, h4. Of course, white should save a pawn. Rook e2 check, king f4, rook d2, g4. White neutralized the bishop activity. Bishop e8, king e3. Now he neutralizes the last active piece, the rook on d2. Rook d1, king e2, bishop a4, and knight f3. White neutralized the black's activity and saved all his stable advantages. Black resigned. By the way, here is an interesting comparison. The white player, Malachov, is an endgame expert, while the black player, Sutovsky, is an excellent attacking master. Thus we have seen two different approaches and ideas clash in the same position. Black tried to get an active, while white collected stable positional advantages. Since it was an endgame position, the white's approach was more suitable. This rule has one useful consequence. When you have an advantage in activity in an endgame, you should use it to gain stable positional advantages. Thus you will convert your temporary advantage in a stable advantage. The concept of stable positional advantages also gives you a clear understanding of when you should transfer a game into an endgame. Generally, you should go into an endgame when you have stable positional advantages. More specifically, you should transfer a game into an endgame when you have an advantage in material, when your opponent is riddled with weak pawns and squares, and when you have passed pawns. In the first lesson, I've told you that an endgame is not a draw. Quite often, exchanges are the simplest way for a win. Now I'm telling you exactly when you should go into an endgame. Please remember this idea because it's very powerful. In the first lesson, I've also told you that some strong grandmasters win their games mainly in an endgame. This is a very typical scenario of their games. In a middle game, one player tries to attack and to be active. He goes forward, makes sacrifices, and pushes the pawns. Right after that, the second player starts trading pieces and transfers the game into an endgame. After that, the second player uses his stable advantages in an endgame and wins the game easily. White has a positional advantage because black has weaknesses around his king and on the king side. Here black played queen e7. Black wants to exchange queens. White didn't mind and answered h takes g5, and black took queen takes a3. And by the way, it's my game where I played white. I remember that my opponent took the queen quickly and looked happy. Maybe he thought that it's good for black to trade queens because his king's position is weak. However, the situation is opposite really. Black has a lot of weaknesses and it's in favor of white to go on to an endgame. In a middle game, black can try to create a counterplay on a king side. In an endgame, black has no chances. White will simply use the black's weaknesses, while black has nothing to oppose. Rook a3, rook takes g5, bishop h4. The white's position is strategically winning already. Rook g6, bishop f6, rook g8, the g2 pawn being attacked, so g3, king d7. The wise general plan is to attack the black's weaknesses. First, white needs to put his pieces on better positions. That's why king f1, the king should be in a center in an endgame. Rook b8, king e2, a5. This pawn is already blockaded on the a3, so it's not dangerous for white. King d2, rook g8, and knight f3. Now white is ready to attack the h-pawn on the h-file. a4, rook h1. Black can protect the pawn, and white is winning. Rook g6, knight h4, rook g4, and knight g2. Now rook g6 doesn't help because of knight f4. White won the material advantage and the game soon. When black played g5 in a middle game and tried to attack on a king side, he probably didn't expect that he will lose the game because of this weakness. Such scenarios happen very often. For example, in Sicilian defense, white often advanced the pawns like f4, g4, and so on. Black often wins by trading the pieces and to win an endgame using the white's weaknesses. Once again, I'd like to repeat that a simplification does not lead to a draw. A transfer to an endgame can be a very powerful and aggressive weapon. Remember, when you exchange pieces, you exchange the defenders of the opponent's weaknesses. Thus it will be simpler for you to attack and to capture them later on. You can easily win an endgame when you have stable positional advantages. The last game illustrates it clearly. Okay, during this lesson I've been telling you a lot about the importance of stable positional factors. It really gives you many useful ideas. And now I'd like to tell you one more. When you start thinking about stable positional factors, when you train it and use it, you develop your clear positional style of playing. Remember endgame masters. They never play in a clumsy style. Their moves are always clear and logical. That's why your endgame improvement will help you generally, not only in an endgame. Alright, time to move forward. Do you remember that we're still talking about an endgame master style? Stable positional factors were the first point. Now we will go to the second point. In an endgame, you should use the principle of two weaknesses. Probably you've heard about it. However, I'd like to ask you, do you use it regularly in your games? You see that everything is not that simple. You need to understand this idea deeply. Only then you will start using it automatically in your games. Okay, what is the point of the principle of two weaknesses? It means that you should stretch an opponent's defense. You should attack him on different sides of the board. Let's imagine that your opponent has 2 pieces and 2 weaknesses. In this case, his situation is fine and he can keep a defense. If you create 2 more weaknesses in his position, then he will have 2 pieces and 4 weaknesses. Thus, he doesn't have enough pieces to protect all his weaknesses. In such situation, you will easily win something. That's why the principle of 2 weaknesses is extremely effective in the endgame. In the middle game, an opponent has a lot of pieces, and they control the whole board. In an endgame, an opposite situation happens. Your opponent has only a few pieces, and you can easily overload them. To be honest, I dislike the name, the principle of 2 weaknesses. First, you should create as much weaknesses as you can in an opponent's position, not only 2. Secondly, you should use not only opponent's weaknesses, but your advantages also. For example, you can attack his weakness on one side and push your passed pawn on another side. The bottom line is this: you should stretch an opponent's defense. I like this better than the principle of 2 weaknesses. It describes what you should really do in a real game. In this position, black has the only real weakness, the pawn b7, and 4 pieces. Of course, black keeps the defense without any problems. White played rook a8. Every exchange exchanges an opponent's defender. Rook takes, rook takes. Now black still has 1 weakness and 3 pieces. It's already a bit better for white. Okay, rook e8, rook a7, bishop c8. Black defends easily. Now it's time to create more weaknesses in the black's position. Black has a weakness on the queen side already, and now white needs to create some weaknesses on the king side. Bishop d3, h5, h4, g6 and g4. If black takes the pawn, it will give white a passed pawn on the h-file in the future. And that's why black didn't take, he just played rook e7, rook e8, rook e8, and white took on the h5, king g3. The situation has been changed considerably. Now black has 3 pieces and 5 real weaknesses. Thus black doesn't have enough pieces to protect everything. His king has to protect the g6 square. The king should also protect the rook, otherwise something like king g7, bishop f5 may happen. The rook is protecting the bishop, and at the same time white is threatening king f4 and bishop f5 at the suitable moment. Black can't close all holes in his position. In the game, black played bishop e6 and resigned after bishop g6 check. White is winning an exchange. Certainly it's easily winning for white. The principle of 2 weaknesses is a very powerful weapon in an endgame. It works often, and you should always try to stretch an opponent's defense. That's why you should realize both endgame plans if you can. So you should attack opponent's weak pawns and use your passed pawns. Okay, there is another principle which works best in an endgame. You should restrict an opponent's counterplay. In an endgame, your opponent has only a few pieces. That's why he doesn't have many possibilities for counterplay. If you limit an activity of these few pieces, you will totally prevent any opponent's counterplay. In a middle game, your opponent has a lot of pieces and he definitely can do something active. That's why this idea works best in an endgame. For example, in a middle game, a Zugzwang happens very rarely, while in an endgame, it's a common winning tool. What should black do in this position? Of course, he needs to finish his development. Looking at it from an opening or in a middle game point of view, black would have to play knight f5 here. In an endgame, however, black may look at this position from another angle. He may first think about the white's plan and how black can prevent this plan. Okay, white probably wants to do something on the queen side. He may play rook c1, knight c5, or knight a5, maybe push the a pawn, something like that. Can black restrict the white's activity? Yes, he played a5, and after rook c1, b6. Now it becomes quite difficult for white to go forward somehow. By the way, black is almost threatening to capture the knight after a4. So white played a4 by himself. King d7, knight c3. Certainly black still may go for knight f5. However, it will give white an active knight on b5. That's why, instead of that, black played knight a7. Black wants to restrict the white's activity first of all. King f1. Really, white has no active possibilities anymore. Only then black starts his development. Knight c6, king e2, rook c8, bishop e1, bishop e7, and knight b1. The white's moves look strange, but what he can do? In an endgame, you can totally restrict an opponent's counterplay and don't give him any activity. This gives you a strategically winning position. You can realize your plan gradually, while your opponent has nothing to do. f5. Black starts gaining space on a king side also. Pawn takes, bishop c3, knight b4. If white takes the knight, bishop takes b4, it will limit an activity of the knight b1 and also will give black the new a-file. It's a very instructive moment really. Black is all primed up for knight b4, however, he didn't hurry up and he waited for the most comfortable situation for that. In the game, white played bishop d2, knight c6, bishop e3. What should black do now? Do you think he should double rooks on the c-file? It's a good idea, but we shouldn't forget about our opponent. After rook c7, white will play knight c3 or knight a3 and then knight b5. That's why black first played knight a2 and only then rook c7. Knight a3, rook c8. Black has prepared a discovered attack, knight takes d4, that's why white can't play knight b5 now. Rook d2. Now the move knight b5 is really possible. What should black do? Of course he should prevent it, knight a7. Rook d3, knight b4. The knight did his job on a2 and now is coming back. Rook d2, rook c6. Black doesn't hurry up, white has nothing to do, that's why black wants to put all his pieces on the best positions first of all. Rook b1, bishop e7. The bishop is going on the more active square on the d6. Rook a1, bishop d6, h3, rook c7, and rook d1. Here black made another good move, knight a2. The white's knight a3 wants to go on b5 sometime, and is the only white's piece which potentially can do something. That's why black wants to exchange this knight. Black is still thinking how to restrict the white's counterplay first of all. After rook a1, black certainly took, bishop takes a3, rook a2 and bishop b4, rook d1, rook c4. Black starts going forward only when white has nothing to do at all. Rook c1, knight c6, rook takes, pawn takes, knight d2. This knight wants to go on e4, and it will be quite active. Black takes it immediately. King takes, king d6, king c3, king d5. Black keeps white in a cage. Rook a1, g6. By the way, what is the reason of this move, g6? One of the ways to restrict an opponent's activity is to protect everything in advance. That's why you should improve your position as much as you can before the realization of your main plan, so your opponent will have no active chances in the future complications. f3, rook b8. Black has a pawn majority on the queen side, and he should advance it. Rook a3, b5, pawn takes, and rook b5. Bishop f2, white still has nothing to do, knight b4. Black is threatening knight d3. White has nothing to do, so black won the game easily afterwards. We should make a few useful conclusions. In an endgame, you can totally restrict an opponent's counterplay. It's a very powerful idea because it gives you a strategically winning position. When your opponent has nothing to do, you will definitely realize your plan sooner or later. There are a few main ways to restrict an opponent's activity. Concerning your position, you should prepare the realization of your plan as good as you can. Improve the position of your every piece and pawn. Protect everything in advance. Cover your weaknesses. Don't hurry up. Wait until the most comfortable situation to begin realizing your plan. Concerning an opponent's position, you should limit an activity of his pieces, and you should exchange his active pieces. If you follow these recommendations, you will ensure your win. You will win a game slowly but surely. Okay, now we come to the last practical recommendation about an endgame master style. In an endgame, you should torment your opponent. Well, maybe it doesn't sound very nice, but it describes the exact process of winning endgames. Generally, you can win a game only after the opponent's mistakes. How can you force an opponent to make mistakes? There are two main ideas here. First, you should constantly create simple threats. An opponent makes mistakes when you put pressure on him, when you create problems for him. In an approximately equal position, you can't create a really huge threat, but you can create many simple threats. That's exactly what you should do. And the second thing, you need to make a lot of moves. You play against a human, and he or she certainly makes mistakes sometimes. Let's say he makes one mistake per 10 moves. So if you want him to make 5 mistakes, you need to make 50 moves. That's why you need to make a lot of moves. This idea is very powerful, and it's much more profound than it first seems. Now I'm going to show you how grandmasters really think during a practical game. It's my game, and I remember clearly what I was thinking about. Now it's the black's turn. Black certainly has an advantage because of an extra pawn. At the same time, it's not easy to realize this advantage. The only real plan for black is to push his extra pawn. However, I doubt if it gives much. After something like pawn takes, queen takes e5, queen e3, queen takes and bishop takes, white will put the king on the d3, and black can't do anything. It should be a draw. Okay, let's come back. So, black has no clear plan for a win, and I'm not sure if this plan exists. What should black do in such a situation? You should torment your opponent. Constantly create simple threats and make a lot of moves. The white situation is quite unpleasant. He has nothing to do, and he has to keep a passive defense. Also, he has to be careful all the time and need to neutralize the black's attacking attempts. Let him experience this sad situation for a long time. Let him feel upset and make mistakes. Black played bishop d8. Black is going to play bishop b6 to attack the d4 pawn. Of course, white can defend it easily by bishop c3 or bishop e3. However, you shouldn't worry about it. Your goal is to create a lot of simple threats. Don't worry if he can repulse it. It was just one of your attempts. Don't take it so seriously. Here is the next important thing here. How can you create a lot of simple threats? You should try to attack him from different sides. Try to use different placement of your pieces and attack different weaknesses. Now black wants to try the bishop's placing on b6. There is no deep idea behind it. Bishop e3, bishop b6, queen c3. The first result came to black. White tries to prevent the e5 move, but gives the f5 square for the black's queen. Maybe there is nothing real there, but anyway, it's a little progress for black. Now I'll tell you another great practical idea. When you taunt your opponent, he will lose the game by himself. He will make unnecessary mistakes and will simplify your task a lot. He will do everything instead of you. You will really be surprised how often they make mistakes. King h7. White was threatening queen c8. Maybe it wasn't a real threat, but in an endgame it's always useful to restrict an opponent's counterplay. We have discussed that a little time ago. a4. Assistance from the side of an opponent is coming again. A defensive side should not move pawns in an endgame. The a4 move is weakening the white's position. Though black can't exploit it right now, but this weakness will remain for the whole game. Bishop f5. Maybe black is threatening queen b1, maybe queen h5 check, maybe both of these ideas are not very powerful, but it doesn't matter. Black is still trying to make simple threats. Here I'll give you another practical recommendation. Don't try to find the best move and don't think much. The black's task is simpler than the white's one. Black may simply play queen f5 without any thinking. White, however, has to calculate the variations to find the correct defense. That's why you shouldn't think much. Let your opponent to think and to spend his time. You only need to create simple threats and make moves. Don't take it too seriously. Your each move is not very important. It's important to keep the style of playing and to torment your opponent. That's why you shouldn't try to find the best move and spend much time for it. Since an opponent's task is more difficult, he will spend more time than you. Therefore, after the next 10-20 moves, he will appear in time trouble. After that, you will win easily. It's not the reason why you should make a lot of moves. White played queen d3, queen h5 check. It's the only attacking move black can play, so black should play it quickly and without any calculations. King d2, queen h4. Once again it's the only move forward. Black is preparing another simple threat, queen g3. King e2, queen g3, king f1. Now black suddenly got a possibility to play e5. White can't take because of the pin. Black will just take the bishop. Therefore, the black's weak pawn e6 became a protected passed pawn on e4. You can see how powerful this style of playing is. Black suddenly got a serious advantage without really doing anything special. When you torment your opponent, he will lose the game by himself. Queen d2, e4, b4. White is weakening his position again. White helps black to win. By the way, he is not a weak player, he has a FIDE master's rating. He made mistakes so often because of two main reasons. First, most players don't understand an endgame and don't know how to play it. Secondly, when you torment your opponent, he is in an unpleasant situation and will make mistakes regularly. Queen d6. You should attack an opponent from different sides. Now the queen is going to attack the new weaknesses on the queen side. King g1. Queen c6, provoking an opponent to weaken his pawns again. b5, queen c4. It's one more simple threat. Black is attacking the pawn. Queen d1, queen c3. It's the only attacking move black can play now. You see how easy it is for you when you play in this style. King f2, bishop d8. You should attack an opponent from different sides and use different placing of the pieces. The bishop is going on h4 or maybe on f6. g3. The new weakness appear. Bishop f6, h4. And white is still moving the pawns and weaken his position again. Queen c8. Black is changing the direction of an attack again. White has weakened his kingside position and the queen is going there. King g2, queen f5. Maybe black is going to play queen h5, maybe not. Anyway, white has to worry about it. At least white will spend a few minutes on thinking about it. Queen e2, king g8. Now black wants to transfer the king in the center. Do you remember the second principle? You should make a lot of moves. Don't hurry up. Queen d1, king f7, queen e2, king e8, queen d1, king d7, queen e2, bishop e7. You should try a different placing of the pieces. The bishop is going on d6, queen d1, bishop d6, queen e2, king e6. There is no great idea behind the black's moves. You need to have a good feel of this style of playing. You torment your opponent. You play with him like a cat with a mouse. You want him to feel upset, and you want him to feel it for a long time. You want him to spend his time, and you're waiting for his mistakes. This style of playing brings great practical results. Look at the games of famous endgame masters. They all use this style all the time. Bishop g2, bishop e7. Certainly white may go back, but it's just another simple threat. Bishop f4, queen h5. Black keeps making simple threats. Queen f1, bishop f6, bishop e3, queen g4, threatening bishop takes h4, queen c1, white is threatening queen c8 check, king f7. If the king is in danger in the center, black will transfer it back to h7. We're going to play a long game and to make a lot of moves. That's why such maneuvers are totally suitable. Queen f1, king g8, king h2, king h7, queen f2. White made another mistake. Now black can go inside queen d1. When you make a lot of moves, your opponent will make a mistake sooner or later. a5, queen d3. And now white can protect the b5 pawn, and that's why he is losing. Do you remember that white advanced his queenside pawns by himself? Now he has to pay for that mistake. After something like b6, black can simply take it, then play queen b3, and black will take the pawn after that. So black won the game soon. During the whole endgame, black didn't realize any real plan. Black only tormented an opponent, and white lost the game by himself. Even when you have a clear plan in an endgame, don't hurry up with its realization. First try to torment your opponent for some time. There is a great chance that your opponent will make mistakes and you will win without any problems. You should use this style of playing when you have a better position and in equal positions as well. It's also a very important practical rule. Play equal endgame positions. Don't agree to draw. Torment your opponent. It doesn't mean that you need to make something special to try to win a game. Definitely not. It would be a common mistake. Just play, just make moves and create simple threats. Don't exchange pieces when it's not necessary, and don't agree to a draw. If you have some pawns, then you still have some chances for a win. Play on. If it be a draw in the end, no problem, it's normal result. However, your opponent may make mistakes and you will win, which is certainly great. Okay, this was all that I wanted to say to you in this lesson. Let's draw the conclusions. An endgame has some specific properties, and that's why the style of playing in an endgame should be different. In an endgame, the stable positional factors have the greatest value. That's why you should collect stable advantages. The stable positional factors are a material and a pawn structure. More specifically, the stable positional advantages are an advantage in material, weaknesses in an opponent's position, and your passed pawns. You can easily evaluate any endgame position based on the stable positional factors. It gives you a guideline of when you should transfer a game into an endgame. When you have material advantage, when your opponent has weak pawns and squares, and when you have passed pawns. While using the concept of stable positional factors, you develop your clear positional style of playing. Okay, the second idea concerning an endgame master style. Use the principle of two weaknesses. This helps you to stretch an opponent's defense, and it's very effective in an endgame. Next idea. Restrict an opponent's counterplay. Concerning your position, you should prepare the realization of your plan as good as you can. Improve the position of your every piece and pawn, protect everything, cover your weaknesses. Don't hurry up and wait until the most comfortable situation. Concerning an opponent's position, limit an activity of his pieces and exchange his active pieces. And the last very powerful property of an endgame master style. Torment your opponent. Constantly create simple threats. Attack an opponent from different sides. Use different placing of the pieces. Try different plans. And make a lot of moves. Don't try to find the best move and don't think much. Just play on and let your opponent to make mistakes and to spend his time. Okay, maybe it seems like a lot of information for you. Please don't worry. In the next lesson we will systematize everything. You'll see that everything is quite simple actually. It's a totally practical system, and I'll show you how to use it in your real games.